So, Colin, today we're going to talk about brands.
Excellent.
All
One of my
right.
favorite topics.
Yeah, it's a rich, fun topic to address. Specifically, we're going to talk about the relationships people form with brands, and often the codependent or dysfunctional relationships people form with brands. Colin, this is an intervention about you and Apple. Um, Need help, my friend, and your family loves you, and we want the best for you. No,
Good luck.
no, but you
Good
do.
luck with
You
this,
have a
mate.
relationship with Apple specifically,
I do.
and I have relationships with brands. We all have relationships with brands. It's interesting that the brand, which is just kind of this, series of legalistic trademarks that companies have, we as human beings tend to kind of anthropomorphize those and treat them as if they're an entity, almost human-like, and we kind of form something close to a relationship with these brands.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to be doing 5 rules about how to
Yes.
build this out. But for me, a brand is like a construct in my brain.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
that's exactly what it
effectively
is.
what you're doing is you're building a construct. Um, and the issue then becomes, is that construct appealing, basically? But I'm just about to waffle on to a load of things that I know we're going to talk about, so I'm going to shut up. Particularly
Yeah,
if
so
you're taking the Mickey out of me about bloody Apple, mate.
well, I've accomplished everything I needed to do today. We can actually call this one short if you want. That was my one item list, was taking the Mickey
Yeah,
out of Colin.
achieved.
So I
Ticked.
think we're done. Yeah, no, you're right. Today we are going to do a 5 rule. So if you manage a brand, if you work for a brand, then you might be interested in developing a brand that customers might form a relationship with. And so we've developed 5 rules for developing brands that are relationship worthy, things that
Yes.
customers might actually be able to form attachments to, and that can be very valuable for the company. All right, so ready? Here's
And
our 5 rules.
in fact, let me just
Yeah,
jump in there if I may,
go for it.
because you just said a really important word, okay, which is attachment.
Yeah,
That's the key. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to get customers to form an attachment. And the interesting thing, and again, people would have heard me say this before, but what it's a bit like your family, okay? You know, do Apple do everything that I like? No. Do they
yeah,
sometimes screw up? Yes. But I have an attachment to them, so I give them. It's that Stephen Covey emotional bank account, yeah, where they've paid a lot of credits in. We've built that a relationship, yeah, and now when they do things that I don't like, yes, that deducts some credits out of the relationship, but I still am loyal to them. The issue becomes with a brand whenever you get down to that 0 credit, and then you start taking having problems. Then that's when customers aren't loyal, and you don't have that attachment anymore. So sorry.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but Stephen Covey's emotional bank account, that he was describing relationships with other people, right?
Yeah, but you see,
Yeah,
that's where I
so
think again it's all the same stuff, isn't it?
that's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. So again, so my as long as we're going off on tangents, my opinion is that we've only got so much cognitive machinery that we've developed over tens of thousands of years of evolution, and our minds are wonderfully flexible. So when we come in contact with something new, like say a brand, something that from an evolutionary perspective just appeared yesterday, we've only got so many different ways that we can process that, and it
Yeah,
seems to fit at least somewhat well with the way we think about other people. And so I think that
yeah,
we then process it in that way. And so drawing on insights from how we relate to other people can actually be really useful. So if we've got these
yes,
emotional bank accounts for people in our lives, there may be something
yeah.
similar that we have with brands in our lives as well, but only brands that we are in a relationship with. We don't treat all brands this way.
Y-
And so the question
y-
is, what causes people to have these relationships?
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing again. We will get on to talk about the 5 rules in a moment, but we're already having a good
We've
conversation about
gotten
this.
Colin excited. Now we just have to
Yeah.
stand back. Yeah.
So just think about one of your friends. I know that will be difficult with you,
That felt
Ryan.
threatening. Yeah. And
Maybe
that was,
think about your friend. I know you only
yeah.
have one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, think about one of your friends. Okay. And think about, if you had to describe them, what would you say? Okay. Because I would argue that's the brand.
Not
Okay. It's
British. That'd be the first thing I would say about my friend. Go ahead. What were you saying? Most important attribute of any friend of mine. Yeah.
But you would, wouldn't you? You would, however it is that you articulate them. And what's become popular recently is obviously personal branding.
Yeah.
And you just go, yeah, but it's the same bloody thing,
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean, you talked about, so the way that I describe branding to my students is that, the brands have this kind of corporate structure. There's all these trademarks that you have. A lot of that is kind of less relevant. What really matters is that brands exist in the minds of your customers. They exist in your customers' memories.
yes,
But so do people. Like people
yes,
exist also as these memory structures, all these
yes,
nodes that are tied together, all the experiences that you have, the thoughts that you have around them, the emotions that you feel. So it is, I think, from a cognitive perspective, the construct representing a person and the construct representing a brand are probably more similar than we might assume.
yes. No, absolutely. So shall we
All
get
right,
on for the 5 rules?
5 rules.
Just,
So here are
just,
5 rules
just
you can
before the
follow.
podcast finishes, but we thought it'd be worth putting it in for the last 5 minutes of the show.
I already did what I came to accomplish today. So if you want to still go through 5 rules, that's fine. That's fine. Um, yeah. So if these are 5 rules for helping you develop brands that customers might be willing to form a relationship with, might be willing to form that attachment to. So, all right, here are the principles. So number one, focus on emotional benefits and value to your customers, not just on product features.
Yeah, good
All
one.
right. So why don't you weigh in on that one first, Colin?
Yeah, I mean it's a classic one, isn't it? Which is again, we often talk about it, which is think about what your customers, and let me throw in the word really want,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
what they say that they want, so what they really want, rather than talking about, oh, well, this system has got a hokey cokey 4,000, and we're sure that customers really like that. It's actually that emotional attachment that you have, or that relationship that you have, that's the key. It's not how fast the processor works or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's not part of the brand.
That's exactly right. I mean, we're going to use a lot of examples from Apple today because they do a lot of this relationship development very well. For many years, there were a lot of other phone brands that outperformed iPhones on specific attributes. They had faster
Name them.
processors, they had better
Name
cameras.
them.
We can look it up, but I feel like if I pursued that further, it might
Yeah, no, you're
worry for
right.
my own
You're
life.
right. I think the Samsung actually,
Yeah,
I remember it did. I don't know if it still does, but
yeah, and they
it did.
promoted
Yeah.
it in their ads. I mean, it was
Yes.
not a secret, right? They had better
Yes.
cameras or better,
Yes.
memory or whatever it was. They had
Yes.
additional features, and yet the iPhone was still outselling them. I think at least in part because of this relationship aspect. People felt
Yes.
differently towards their iPhones. Let me rephrase that. This is also a segmentation story like anything else. There are people who have relationships with their Samsung phones and feel very passionately about that.
Sure.
There was, I think, a larger group that had a felt like they had a relationship with their iPhone. Right?
Sure.
And it's because Apple's very, very good at focusing on those emotional benefits, right? They lean heavily into design, into things that make their products very intuitive to use, with this aim of getting people attached to them. Right?
Yes.
So focus on emotional
No,
benefits
absolutely.
and value, not just on product features. If your relationship with an offering is at the product feature level, then as soon as somebody else has better features, they're going to abandon your product for something else. If I'm
Yeah.
primarily buying this because of the better, battery life, then as soon as somebody else has better battery life, I'm going to drop you and go with somebody else.
Can I just challenge that for a minute?
Please.
And just look at it from a different side, because I guess to a certain extent, I mean, if part of your brand values is about, I don't know, innovation, or your customer segment is about that your customer needs are, wanting to be a first mover, okay, then those things would become important, wouldn't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not that product features don't matter,
Sure,
but they have to serve the aim. Like if I could use a really
sure.
crass example, my wife is very beautiful. Um, but if I valued our relationship based strictly off of her beauty, then all it's going to take is for me to find somebody more beautiful, and then that
Yeah.
relationship's over, and I start a new one. As opposed
But you,
to,
you you wouldn't be able to do that, would you, mate? I mean,
well,
let's be honest.
no,
You
because
wouldn't be able to do that.
I'm very lucky to have found one person who's willing to tolerate me. The idea that there's somebody else out there who might also be willing to. But that's a relationship at kind of a product feature level, and I feel gross even saying that in this context. But um,
Oh, have I got
as a
some material now?
as, so does my wife's divorce attorney. Um, as opposed to like that being a feature that is part of a relationship, right?
Yeah,
So it's not that we form these relationships, these emotional values, these emotional benefits absent of any product feature, that they
sure,
matter, but are they
sure,
feeding into that relationship as opposed to being
sure.
a feature by itself?
Yes,
I feel like I should
absolutely.
stop talking for at least a little while.
Listen, once you get divorced, you'll have more time for doing
That's
shows, so you'll be fine.
We're going to start putting these out twice a week because I don't have anything else to do. Good. All right. So that's rule number one. Focus on benefits and not exclusively on product features. Number two, develop a brand personality that aligns with the emotions, values, and beliefs of your target customer. So again, the more people think about a brand as person-like, the greater likelihood that they will form a relationship with that brand.
Yeah,
Excuse me. Um, and so develop a brand personality, like not just like these features, but what is your brand like? Is it fun? Is it cheeky? Is it serious? Is it an expert? Does it have gravitas? If you're consistent with these personality elements of your branding, then it'll be more likely that people will kind of create that construct in a person-like mode and therefore be willing to form a relationship.
so can I put a caveat on this one?
Please.
So the only caveat I would put on this one, and I'm going to refer to this when we get down to item number 4 in the rules, is it's okay doing that as long as it's achievable.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
I think I may have told you the story before, but there was an advert that used to happen in England for a insurance company, and the advert had people phoning the call center and then falling about laughing after they got the quote with happiness. Okay,
Yeah.
and it was called "Quote Me Happy." Okay,
Yep.
and they spent millions on the bloody thing. Okay, every time I phoned them, I didn't fall about the floor laughing. In fact, I got really annoyed because they would keep me waiting on the phone for half an hour, and all those types of things. So I think the issue is that, and this is a big problem that I have with brands, is it's got to be practical. It's got to align. So do I think
Yes.
that you need brand personalities and all those things? Yes, I do. But it's really got to be aligned and deliverable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's got to be consistent with what customers want in that domain. Like, do you want an insurance company that seems silly and frivolous? So, like, even
Yes.
if they somehow could make you
Yes.
deliriously happy on the phone, is that actually what you want from your
Sure.
insurer? There's a cemetery near my home. Right?
That sounds a fun place.
Yeah. So as I drive by, and it used to be called something, like Shady Acres or, whatever, some cemetery name. And I noticed that they rebranded several years ago, and they put up a new sign in front of the cemetery. And I had to pull over and take a picture of it, and I use it as an example in my class now. Now the name of the cemetery is Advantage, um,
Advantage.
which sounds like bizarrely aggressive for a cemetery. Like, I'm not sure the personality of that
Well,
brand that they're going with is going to meet the needs. I assume exclusively like investment bankers are buried there.
what,
It's only people who want
what,
to win. Um,
what's the advantage of being dead?
I don't, I don't
I
know.
mean, I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so weird to me. So it's not enough to develop a personality. It has to be a
Yes.
personality that matters to your customers, that is consistent with what they want in that
Yes.
category, that you can deliver on, all of those things.
And let's talk about this a little bit more here, because I think it's relevant. And this is one of the things that annoys me about branding within organizations is it's so nuanced and theory based. And I find whenever I talk to somebody that's really into brand, that you virtually don't know what the bloody hell they're talking about because it is so ethereal. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let me give you an example. We did some work for a mobile phone company, and I was talking to them about how a customer experience manifests itself. And let me be very clear. We always say, and I totally believe that the brand makes the promise in the
yeah.
marketplace. Customer experience delivers against that promise. So the brand is effectively more important than the customer experience. But the key thing is that they align between the
But you do
two.
need
Okay.
both.
You need both. Yeah. Um, uh, the issue for me was that, and this is fairly typical when it goes to your advanced piece, is that for this mobile phone company, one of the brand personalities that they had, or brand values that they had as well, was we want it to be inspirational. Okay, and I said to them, look, great, you want your brand to be inspirational, but if I'm in a call center, how am I going to be inspirational
Yeah.
when a customer phones through or I'm dealing with a customer complaint? You're setting me up to fail,
Well, no,
basically.
you break out into a stirring rendition of "Climb Every Mountain" from, I think that's from Don Quixote,
Yeah,
or "The Man of La
but
Mancha." That's what it's from. Yeah,
yeah, so I totally agree with. Let me be clear. I totally agree with rule 2.
yeah,
Developing a brand personality that aligns to the emotions, values, and beliefs of the target customer. I guess the only piece I would add into this, and I would, that is, I would add the words that is practical, basically.
yeah.
Otherwise, the danger is you're setting yourself up to fail. So
I think that's a great caveat on that.
great.
All right, number 3. Remember the power of storytelling in creating emotional
Yes.
connections with your brand.
Yeah.
So,
Very good one.
human beings are storytellers and
Yeah.
story processors. So we tend to remember information better when it comes in the form of a story. We tend to
Yeah.
fill in blanks when we hear stories, as opposed to when we just get kind of raw information.
Yeah.
And then stories are what humans tell each other. It's part of how we connect to other humans. Is we tell each other about our day. We tell each other about where we grew up and our past experiences. And so if you want people to form a relationship with your brand, tell a story about your brand, right? This is part of why you hear so many stories about like the founders creating their company in the garage of their parents or something.
Yeah.
All of these founder myths are part of the story of the brand.
Yes.
And so create that, like lean into that, create a story around your brand.
Yes, no, I think that's a good one and is often overlooked by organizations. Yeah,
Yeah,
good
it's
one.
a real opportunity there. Um, Number 4, and Colin, you already made reference to this a little bit. It's such an important one.
Yeah.
Deliver on your promises. When we
Yeah.
fail to deliver on our promises, that erodes trust, it erodes emotional attachment, and it kills a relationship, or turns it into a negative, toxic relationship. So, um, deliver on, make customers trust you. That's it. That's the basis. That's a foundation for any good relationship, is trust.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the issue for me is that, and I've seen this recently with some clients that we've been dealing with, to recognize that trust is fundamental. I mean, I
Yes.
can't see any organization not having that. But the issue becomes, what else?
Yeah.
So, and a key issue becomes, what is going to differentiate you? And go back to my favorite topic, does it drive value?
Yeah.
So, things like feeling cared for or valued or happy or pleased, what else? Because to be totally honest with you, and I'm not trying to undermine trust, whatever, at all, but everyone does that. Okay. Some don't do it very well, I have to say. But it's got to go beyond that. And it's got to be virtually a hierarchy, yeah, of trust and maybe cared for, and then maybe something that's feeling valued or something like that. I wouldn't go as high as going inspirational or advantage or something like that, because you then go, what in the bloody hell does that mean? It means somebody. Can you imagine being in that the marketing meeting of your cemetery, um,
Yes, I can imagine
and
that. I'm picturing people
and
in you know dark
yeah, and
clothing, black
yeah, and
eyeliner.
somebody's going, why don't we have advantage? That's a good idea. That tells a story, doesn't it? Well, the story is that you need a new marketing department. That's the bloody story.
Yeah, no, I like that, and I agree. I think that the trust is forms the foundation, but you need to build on a foundation. You
Yes,
can't stop
I
there.
agree
I think that
totally.
but to your earlier distinction about the brand creating the promise and then the experience delivering on the promise, if we're talking about the brand, you need to make sure that you are creating promises that can be delivered on. Right? Don't
Yes,
overpromise in your branding. Going back to your example of the insurance agency, like there's no way people calling into an insurance agency are going to be deliriously happy. That never
no,
happens. So why are we
no,
promising that up front?
yes. And I think another key for me is that there's a sort of needs to be a recognition here that it's not a short-term fix.
Right.
What you're not looking for is, oh, did we increase our sales in the next 3 months after launching the brand? This is not something that is going to be something that's going to have a massive effect in the short term. And therefore, this has got to be a longer term thing. And therefore, for me, because it's a longer term issue, you've really got to make sure that it's the right thing and it's driving value, basically.
Excellent. All right. Last one. So this is my own formulation here. So Colin, you're free to push back on this one. But the way that I phrase this is rule number 5: people don't form relationships with clouds. And by that I mean your branding can't be this kind of ephemeral intellectual exercise where you've
Yes,
got things like, oh, we're going to be inspiring, or we're going to
sure,
this is like the anthropological meaning of like our brand symbols.
sure.
People need something concrete's not the right word, but substantive. People need something that they can latch onto if they're going to form a relationship with it. It can't be all airy and kind of
Yeah,
just mist.
yeah. Well, so and here's the interesting one. Um, the people that come up with this stuff, how do they how do they communicate it?
Yeah.
So the danger is, and again, I've been there in corporate organizations where the branding people tell of a new brand or a new brand positioning, and you listen to them talk, and you think, what bloody planet are you on? Have you just invented a new language? Because
Yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, I thought I was intelligent, but I don't understand a word you're talking about. You know,
And what are the
and
chances
then,
that the frontline employees are going to
well,
understand well enough
and
to?
that's the issue. And that where you go back to number 2 about aligning to the values, and number 4 about delivering on the promises. It's all right having this ephemeral view of what the world looks like that's got lots of intellectualization into it. And let me be clear, to a certain extent, that's what this podcast is about. It's about looking at some of those theories. But I go back to it and our company, beyond philosophy, you've got to then go, so if we've got this wonderful idea, how in the hell do we do it? And part of that is then about how are we going to articulate it to, and I do always go, I used to run call centers, as you know, I do go back to how do I articulate it to somebody that's sitting in a call center? And how do I get them to understand it and then enact that with the customer? Back in the early days, you don't hear it very often now, actually, but back in the early days of customer experience, okay, so I'm talking 2002 odd, the phrase branded experience was nearly adopted as
Yeah.
opposed to customer experience.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, making the sort of the difference really to go in, or making the link. And I had some sympathy with this view between the brand should live through to the experience, and therefore we should call it a branded experience as opposed to a customer experience, because the danger is people then talk about brand and customer experience and how do the two fit together, and
Right.
all that type of stuff. But I did have sympathy with that view, because that's what you're effectively trying to do. You're trying to get people to live the brand promise for you. And ideally, you would be recruiting people who can live the brand and who can deliver the emotions that you want to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And from that perspective, I mean, you and I have, made a little bit of fun about a brand saying they wanted to be inspiring. But from that perspective, I think that is reasonable in some contexts, provided, as you said, you can make some real solid connections to the ground, right? So if we want our customers to feel
Yeah,
inspired, what are the specific actions we are going to be able to take within our experience, our customer experience, to encourage people to feel inspired, as opposed to like just having up on the wall of the call center inspiring, right? Like that's
yeah.
not going to communicate
Well,
anything.
it also depends upon the industry that you're in.
Of course. Of course.
Okay, so if you're in a industry that is, I don't know, about um, weight loss or movies or
Yep.
something like that, then maybe
Yep.
inspiring is the right thing. But if you're in a water utility,
Exactly.
I'm not really sure how you can be inspiring in a water
Yes.
utility. Yeah.
We make the
And
best septic systems in the world, and we want to inspire the world by have right there. Yeah, it's the
yeah.
wrong goal for that brand because it doesn't align with customers' values in that category, right? And water
Well,
utilities is another example.
it also, for me, is about aligning the capability of the organization.
Yes.
Okay. So, and I've said this to many clients. So, again, let's just talk about inspiring. If you've, if you are employed, if you've employed a load of boring people that are the least inspiring people that you ever got, then it would
And
imply.
this is where you chose to make direct eye contact with me as we're recording this, Colin. Go ahead.
but
Tell me more about working with boring people, Colin.
But it would imply that you would need to get rid of those people,
Yeah.
okay, and you would need to replace them with people who are inspiring, by nature. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always there's a friend of mine who shall remain nameless, who is a really nice guy, and I get on with him well, but you can't trust a word he says. Okay. So
Again, the direct eye contact, Colin. Just come out and say this stuff.
So if you're trying to create trust, don't employ him. Yeah. But if you're trying to create fun, employ him, because he's a great laugh, you know. So it's about aligning, and we've said this in here, haven't we? We've used the word aligning somewhere, I can't remember where, but it's about aligning the brand to the actual spirit experience, which is key.
Yeah, and I mean, we've made this point a couple different times, but it bears repeating. This shouldn't just be a purely kind of inspirational exercise within the organization too. Like, what would we love for the brand to be? It needs to be practical. Like, if you're Disney, you have the tools available through your offerings to inspire awe, for example, or wonder. Like, those are reasonable and thing. If you're selling bottled water, you don't have the tools available to you. You should aim for something else, something that you can still create, something that people can have a relationship with. But yeah, it has to be kind of within the constraints, as opposed to just like this brainstorming exercise from management about what would we love for people to feel about. We need to make contact with reality at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, a good way to end the show, mate. Contact with reality. Yeah, great, good, okay. So we hope that's of use to you, and we look forward to talking to you next week on the show. So cheers. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode.